Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we are going to be tackling Bitcoin,
Okay.
but through a very specific lens. We're going to be looking at it through Michael Saylor's 21 rules
Oh, cool.
for understanding this revolutionary technology. And these were rules that he kind of laid out
Okay.
at BTC Prague 2024.
Mm.
And, this isn't just somebody who is like, a
Right.
armchair philosopher. Saylor's the founder of MicroStrategy. This is the first publicly traded company to go all in on Bitcoin.
Huge.
So he put his money where his mouth is.
Yeah, what I think is so fascinating about Michael Saylor
Hmm.
is he approaches Bitcoin from this perspective of science and economics.
Mm.
It's not just about the technology. It's like this really profound shift in how we think about money
Right.
itself.
So let's jump into some of these rules.
Okay, let's do it.
He starts off with a very bold statement. Those who understand Bitcoin buy Bitcoin, and those that don't criticize it.
A little spicy.
It's a little spicy. It's a
Yeah.
little bit of a challenge
Yeah.
almost, right?
It is, and I think he's being intentionally provocative there.
Mm-hmm.
He is highlighting like the human resistance we have to paradigm shifts.
Mm.
And Bitcoin is like this huge paradigm shift, forcing us to really rethink our assumptions about what money is.
Well, he even admits that, he himself initially
Right.
was not a believer.
Hmm.
He was skeptical of Bitcoin,
Totally.
which brings us to his second rule. Everybody is against Bitcoin before they're for it.
Yeah, I mean,
Is this just human nature resisting the unfamiliar?
I think it's definitely part of it. I mean, think about any major innovation in history, right?
Yeah.
The internet,
Right.
the automobile, electricity, all of these things were met with skepticism,
Mm.
fear initially.
Yeah.
It takes time for people to wrap their minds around radical new ideas.
So how do we move past that initial resistance?
Yeah.
Saylor's third rule seems to suggest that true understanding is a journey, not a destination.
Okay.
You realize that you're never fully going to understand Bitcoin.
That's interesting.
Wow.
I think what's so cool about this rule is he's not saying Bitcoin is too complex to grasp.
Mm.
What he's emphasizing is its constantly evolving nature. Like he describes it as this virus,
Yeah.
spreading across time and space. It's like this living thing that there's always more to learn.
It speaks to that feeling of constant discovery.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, now this is where things get really interesting. Rule number 4. Bitcoin is powered by chaos.
Ooh.
He's not talking about, market volatility here, right?
Not just market volatility. He's talking about something much bigger, like societal and economic upheaval.
Mm.
And he makes the argument that Bitcoin thrives precisely when traditional systems fail, when the world feels uncertain.
He uses this really powerful analogy to illustrate this. Imagine it's World War II and you can choose to own any asset in Europe, land buildings companies, or you can own the Swiss bank that is holding everybody's money.
Interesting.
Which do you pick?
It's like a brilliant way to frame this concept of a safe haven asset. Because during times of chaos, all those other things, land buildings, companies,
Right.
they become incredibly vulnerable.
Right.
But that Swiss bank, representing neutrality, stability,
Mm-hmm.
that becomes invaluable. And that's how Saylor sees Bitcoin.
He goes on to say that traditional finance is a rigged casino where the odds are stacked against you.
Totally.
But Bitcoin, he argues, is the one game where everyone can win.
I love that metaphor. It challenges our assumptions about how fair our current financial system actually is.
Right. And it kind of suggests that Bitcoin offers this way to level the playing field.
Totally.
Which brings us to rule number 5. Bitcoin is the one thing in the universe that you can truly own.
Whoa.
It's a big statement,
That's a big one, yeah.
especially in a world where governments and corporations just seem to have more and more control.
Yeah, what Saylor's highlighting here is this decentralized nature of Bitcoin,
Right.
right? Like no single entity can confiscate it or manipulate its value.
Right.
It really puts you, the individual, in control of your assets.
He makes this very stark comparison. He says that everything else we own is essentially held at the pleasure of someone more powerful than you.
Wow.
It makes you think, what does true ownership even mean in today's world?
That's a huge question,
Yeah.
And Bitcoin, in a way, is really forcing us to re-examine our relationship with ownership and control.
Okay, ready for another one?
Fit me.
All right. Saylor gets a bit philosophical with rule number 6. Everybody gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve.
That's a very intriguing statement.
What do you think he means by that?
Well, I think he is talking about the element of personal choice here.
Okay.
It's about overcoming fear and doing your research
Hmm.
and ultimately deciding whether or not to embrace this new paradigm.
Yeah.
The price you pay both literally and figuratively
Right.
reflects your conviction.
He actually shares a very funny anecdote about his own early Bitcoin missteps.
Oh, yeah.
Back in 2013, he tweeted, "Bitcoin's days are numbered."
Oh, no.
Big mistake, he says.
Huge mistake.
But it taught him a valuable lesson.
Yeah, it shows that even the most informed individuals can be resistant to change.
Right.
And I think Saylor's willingness to admit his past skepticism
Right.
makes his current advocacy even more powerful.
And then he comes out with a rule that seems to contradict a lot of conventional wisdom.
Okay.
Only invest in Bitcoin with money you can't afford to lose.
Whoa, wait a minute. Isn't the typical advice to only invest what you can afford to lose?
Right. He is totally flipping the script here.
Yeah, what's going on there?
He's arguing that holding on to fiat currency, especially in a world of rampant money printing,
Right.
is the real risk. He thinks Bitcoin is the safer bet, the superior form of money.
So basically he's saying we need to rethink our entire concept of risk and reward.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now, this next one is pure Saylor. He loves his metaphors.
All right, bring it on.
Okay, rule number 8, the economic matrix is a debt-based fiat Ponzi scheme.
Okay, hold on. He's not suggesting we're all living in like a simulation, is he?
No, not literally, but he is pointing to what he sees as this illusion of control and stability within the traditional financial system.
Okay.
And he sees Bitcoin as this way to escape,
Oh, I like
to
the
opt out of a system.
the red pill, blue pill situation.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the ticket to escape the matrix.
Yeah. And the price of those tickets,
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin,
It's certainly a powerful image.
it really captures that sense of urgency and that transformative potential that Saylor sees in Bitcoin.
Okay.
It's not just about making money. It's about fundamentally changing how we think about finance and value.
And that leads us to rule number 9, which gets a bit more specific.
Yeah.
I think Bitcoin insight is restricted to those with a need to know.
That's a little cryptic. What's he getting at there?
I think he's suggesting that those who are very comfortable within the existing system,
Okay.
those who benefit from it,
Right.
they're less likely to see the need for Bitcoin.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's often those facing, economic hardship or uncertainty who really grasp its value.
It's like survival instinct kicking in.
Right.
When the familiar systems fail, people start looking for alternatives.
Exactly. It's in those moments of crisis that Bitcoin's true value becomes clear.
Okay, buckle up for this one rule number 10. All your models will be destroyed.
What?
He's talking about how Bitcoin is shattering our traditional economic models
Right.
and assumptions, and he believes that we need to just rethink
Hmm.
everything we thought we knew about finance and economics.
That's a big ask.
He literally says all the models, they don't really make any sense anymore if you understand Bitcoin.
So we need to come up with new models then.
He calls Bitcoin the orange pill,
Oh.
the cure for the economic ills
Interesting.
of the traditional financial system.
I like it.
He doesn't hold back.
Hmm.
He says your capital is toxic. Your currency is toxic.
Yeah.
He sees fiat currency as inherently flawed, especially with all this money printing and inflation happening globally.
Right.
He sees Bitcoin as the antidote.
Okay, so where do we go from here?
Well, that's where we'll pick up in part 2.
Awesome. Can't wait.
We're going to delve into the next set of rules and explore how they challenge us to rethink our relationship with money and the financial system itself.
I'm ready.
I think you're going to like this next batch. They get really interesting.
Awesome. I'm excited.
So stick around.
Definitely. All right. Picking back up with Michael Saylor's 21 rules for Bitcoin. Let's dive into rule number 11. Be for Bitcoin. Don't be against fiat. Now, this might sound kind of contradictory. How do you interpret that?
It's a really interesting point. I think he's acknowledging the reality that we still live in this fiat-based world. He uses the example of Bernard Arnault,
Okay.
one of the wealthiest people on the planet.
Yeah.
Arnault understands the value of Bitcoin, but, he still prices his luxury goods in euros and dollars.
It's about practicality, right? We can embrace Bitcoin without necessarily needing to, demonize or completely abandon fiat currency.
Right.
The gradual transition, not a violent revolution.
Then us versus them.
Exactly.
Bitcoin is for everybody. Yeah. Rule 12, Bitcoin is for everybody. It's for the people you don't like.
I like that.
It speaks to the inclusivity and the neutrality of Bitcoin.
Right.
It doesn't discriminate based on political beliefs,
Yeah.
background, anything.
He even suggests that we should be happy when our opponents buy Bitcoin. Because it helps to drive up the price.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, it reinforces this idea that, Bitcoin's success ultimately benefits everyone,
Right.
regardless of their differences.
Okay.
All right, now this next rule might be my favorite.
Okay.
Rule 13. Learn to think in Bitcoin.
What do you think he means by that?
Well, I think it's about shifting our perspective.
Okay.
Instead of viewing everything through the lens of dollars or euros,
Yeah.
Right. We start evaluating opportunities in terms of their potential Bitcoin returns.
Okay.
It's like adopting this whole new economic language.
It can be a very powerful way to frame decisions.
Totally.
He gives this example of someone considering taking out a loan with a 5% interest rate. Seems reasonable. But what if Bitcoin is appreciating at 50% per year?
Oh, wow.
Suddenly, that loan looks a lot more appealing if you're thinking in Bitcoin terms.
You're thinking totally different.
It really highlights an opportunity cost
Right.
of holding on to fiat currency.
Yeah. In a world where Bitcoin's value is potentially like skyrocketing,
Right.
what are we missing out on by clinging to these old ways of thinking?
Yeah.
Okay. Rule 14. Short and sweet, but it packs a punch. You don't change Bitcoin.
Ooh.
Bitcoin has its own rules, its own code, its own unyielding nature.
It's a great point. You can't just tweak the system to suit your needs. It's like his analogy of lecturing eagles on how to fly.
Yeah, it's just as futile.
Yeah.
It's better to adapt and learn to work within Bitcoin's framework than to try and bend it to your will.
Okay.
Which brings us to Rule 15, one that I think is going to spark some conversation. Laser eyes protect you from endless lies.
I mean, there's definitely like a layer of humor there.
Yeah.
But I think he's making a serious point about focus and commitment. He sees those laser eyes as this symbol of staying true to Bitcoin's principles.
Yeah.
Even when you're surrounded by all this doubt and misinformation.
It's about filtering out the noise, cutting through the FUD, that fear, uncertainty, and doubt,
Right.
and focusing on that long-term potential of Bitcoin.
He tells this cautionary tale about those who declared victory too early in Bitcoin's journey.
Oh, yeah?
Thinking they'd made it and then missing out on these even greater gains.
Patience is key.
Patience and conviction, I think,
Yeah.
are big themes here.
And that ties nicely into Rule 16. Respect Bitcoin, or it will make a clown out of you.
Another playful phrase, but again, I think there's a pretty powerful message underneath.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, don't underestimate this technology.
Right.
Don't try to manipulate it or get ahead of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Approach it with humility and a willingness to learn, or you might end up looking foolish.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that Bitcoin is this powerful force, much bigger than any individual. Trying to control it or outsmart it is a losing game.
Okay, we're getting to the home stretch here with Rule 17, Ocho DL.
Yeah, a classic for a reason.
Our listeners have definitely heard this one before.
Right, and Saylor's not advocating for never selling your Bitcoin. It's more about emphasizing the importance of holding on to it for the long term.
Right.
He even compares selling your Bitcoin to, like, squandering energy, urging us to conserve your energy for something truly worthwhile.
Interesting.
And he even challenges the idea of diversification, arguing that trading your Bitcoin for other assets is often a downgrade. He really views it as the ultimate store of value, one that's going to appreciate significantly over time. So holding on to it, even when markets are volatile, is a key part of his philosophy.
It's a very different way of thinking about investing.
It is, yeah.
But he's not just talking about making money.
No, he's not.
He believes Bitcoin can actually be this force for good in the world.
Rule 18. Bitcoin is a swarm of cyber hornets serving the goddess of wisdom.
He does have a way with words.
That's pretty epic.
What's he trying to say with this metaphor?
Well, I think he's highlighting the power of Bitcoin's decentralized network, right? It's like a swarm of hornets, unstoppable, relentless. But this force is guided by a higher purpose. This goddess of wisdom representing, truth, transparency, fairness.
It's a very poetic way of saying that Bitcoin isn't just about disrupting the financial system.
Yeah.
It's about building a better one.
Totally. One that's more equitable, accessible, and resistant to corruption.
And this kind of brings us to a rule that really resonates with me.
Okay.
Spread Bitcoin with love, not hate. It's Rule 19, and it's such a powerful message.
It is, especially in a world that feels so divided.
Right.
Saylor understands that not everyone is going to embrace Bitcoin right away. There's going to be resistance, skepticism, even fear. But he encourages us to approach those who are hesitant with empathy and understanding.
He even says, Satoshi, forgive them, they know not what they do.
It's like he's channeling a higher power,
Yeah.
asking for patience and compassion as we navigate this new world.
It's a reminder that education and understanding are key to driving adoption.
Absolutely. We can't force people to change their minds,
All right.
but we can create an environment that encourages curiosity and open-mindedness.
And maybe that's the most powerful thing about Bitcoin. It's a technology that invites us to rethink not just our financial systems, but also how we interact with each other.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
Now, before we jump into the final two rules and some of the listener questions that we've received,
Yes.
I'm curious, what's been resonating with you the most from these 19 rules so far?
It's really hard to pick just one, but I think the overarching theme that really sticks out to me is this idea of a paradigm shift. You know, Saylor's not just talking about Bitcoin. He's talking about this fundamental change in how we view money value and even power.
Yeah, I agree. It's a radical way of thinking, and it can be really challenging to wrap your head around. But it's also incredibly exciting, don't you think?
Absolutely. There's this sense of possibility
Yeah.
of being part of something truly transformative.
Okay, well, let's dive into those last two rules and see what other insights we can uncover, and then we'll tackle those listener questions,
Let's do it.
some of which are quite thought-provoking.
Okay, so we're back for the final two rules from Michael Saylor's 21 Rules of Bitcoin.
Right.
And then we're going to get to some of your insightful questions and comments,
Yeah.
which I love.
Yeah, I think our listeners are really grappling with some of these concepts.
Yeah,
So there's one about Bitcoin thriving in times of chaos.
that one definitely sparked a lot of discussion.
For sure.
But before we get there, let's tackle rule number 20. Money is energy. Conserve your energy. Now, this seems a little abstract. What's he getting at here?
Well, I think he's drawing this parallel between money and energy, both of which can be, spent, saved, or invested.
Right.
And he's urging us to view Bitcoin as this form of stored energy, something to be conserved and accumulated rather than squandered on, frivolous purchases or risky trades.
So thinking long term,
Yeah,
building wealth steadily rather than chasing those quick profits.
exactly. And it ties back to his earlier point about HO dealing, right?
Right.
About having the conviction to hold on to your Bitcoin even when the market's volatile.
It's like an environmentalist approach to finance almost.
Yeah, it is. It challenges that consumerist mentality,
Right.
that often drives our spending habits. Instead of constantly seeking that next shiny object, Saylor's encouraging us to focus on building something lasting,
Right.
something that will appreciate and value over time.
Which brings us to the final rule, and it's a very fitting one.
Yeah.
Satoshi, forgive them. They know not what they do.
There's a lot packed into that simple statement.
It's almost like a prayer.
Yeah.
He's acknowledging the resistance,
Right.
the misunderstanding that Bitcoin faces.
Yeah.
But he's also expressing, I think, the sense of compassion for those who just haven't quite grasped its potential yet.
It's like he's saying, give him time,
Right.
Be patient. They'll come around eventually.
And it speaks to the power of education.
Totally.
Saylor understands that most people's skepticism just stems from a lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
They just haven't taken the time to really understand Bitcoin,
Right.
its underlying technology, and its potential to change the world.
It's on us then to help educate.
So it's up to those of us who do understand to spread the word to educate others with patience and empathy,
For sure.
which thankfully is something our listeners are already doing.
Yeah.
We got some fantastic questions and comments about these 21 rules.
Right.
So let's dive into those.
Let's do it.
One question that came up a lot was about this idea of Bitcoin thriving in times of chaos.
Yeah.
Several listeners wanted us to maybe elaborate on that concept,
Okay.
give some real-world examples.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's easy to get caught up in the abstract ideas, but it's important to ground them in reality.
Right.
So think about the 2008 financial crisis.
Yeah.
The global economy was on the brink of collapse.
Right.
Trust in these traditional institutions was just shattered. People were desperately seeking alternatives.
Right.
And that's when Bitcoin emerged, offering this decentralized, transparent system
Right.
that was immune to the manipulations of central banks and governments.
Right. And it wasn't just a theoretical solution. People actually started using Bitcoin as a way to protect their wealth, to transact outside of this failing financial system.
Yeah, it became a lifeline for many.
Fast forward to the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020.
Oh, yeah.
Governments around the world are printing money at unprecedented rates,
Great.
leading to these fears of inflation,
Yeah.
currency devaluation. And once again, Bitcoin's appeal as a safe haven asset just surged.
It makes sense.
And more recently, we've seen the devastating war in Ukraine and the subsequent sanctions imposed on Russia. Bitcoin has become this vital tool for individuals and organizations seeking to move money across borders.
Yeah.
Bypassing those traditional financial channels that have been disrupted by conflict and geopolitical tensions.
It's a really powerful example of how Bitcoin can facilitate,
Yeah.
you know, financial freedom and autonomy
Right.
in these really difficult circumstances.
And these are just a few examples.
Right.
But they illustrate this recurring pattern
Yeah.
when the world feels uncertain.
Right.
When traditional systems fail or prove to be inadequate, Bitcoin's value proposition becomes even more compelling.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's not that Bitcoin creates chaos.
Right.
It's that it thrives in those chaotic environments,
Right.
offering this solution that's resilient, adaptable, and ultimately empowering.
And that's a very powerful message, I think, for our listeners to consider.
Yeah, for sure.
We live in a world that's increasingly complex and unpredictable.
Sure.
The old ways of doing things are no longer guaranteed to work.
Absolutely. And Bitcoin, with its decentralized and transparent nature,
Right.
offers this new path forward. It's not a magic bullet, of course,
Right.
but it's a tool that can help us navigate those challenges ahead to build a future that's more resilient, more equitable, and more free.
I think that's a great note to end on.
Yeah,
We've explored Michael Saylor's 21 rules of Bitcoin,
we did it.
unpacked their meaning, grounded them in these real-world examples.
Yeah. Hopefully this deep dive has sparked some curiosity,
I hope so.
challenged some assumptions, and maybe even inspired you to explore this fascinating world of Bitcoin a little bit further.
As Saylor himself might say, think in Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's right.
Challenge the status quo,
Yeah.
embrace the unknown, and see what possibilities emerge.
I love that.
We'll be back next week with another deep dive into the ideas that are shaping the future.
Can't wait.
Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep those laser eyes focused on what matters most first.